Hello, everyone. So I've been kicked off twice now, and we're going to try it again. Hey, Dad. Welcome to Fab Collab Live's Curtain Call series. We host different women in the performing arts industry every week at Wednesday at 12 p.m. We're going to try this again because I've been kicked off twice. So fabcollab.ca, you'll see all the information about Fab Collab that was founded almost a year ago to really feature hey Cody, and focus on women and BIPOC and minority voices in the performing arts industry. We've hosted a couple of large concert series called Women in Song. We have this weekly series, Curtain Call, and we have Girls with Gear. Our next one is actually this Friday. It's the first Friday of every month, and it's on Bramble. We got lots of stuff going on. So today, hi everyone. Today we're actually going to feature none other than my mother, Dr. Judith R Cohen, and we'll bring her on right now. It should work this time. Hey Alina, hey everyone, thanks for rejoining. Appreciate that. And
Hi.
there we are. Hey
I think
Mom.
this time it worked. Hi. Wait a second. When did you walk off with that dress of mine?
Hey Jay, just joined. I don't know, a few years ago.
But I knew you had that other one, but I didn't realize you had that one.
I thought it would be appropriate for today, and I thought you'd always wonder when I stole it, and I thought I'd let you know now that I stole it like many years ago. Where's this dress from? Can you tell us?
Well, it's Afghanistan, but actually it originally belonged to your Aunt Sazi, your Aunt Sarah.
Oh,
And she gave it to me because she didn't want to wear it anymore. And as you may remember, I wore it for my 60th birthday party concert.
well, I probably stole it right after that.
No, I think I took it home.
I know, but I have access to your closet. I have full access to your closet. I'm still doing dress up. Anyway, welcome to Fab Club Live, Curtain
Well,
Call
it's exciting
series.
to be here.
How's your day going?
Mostly wondering what I was going to do for Fab Collab Live.
What do you mean? What you were gonna do?
Well, I'm trying to be spontaneous, so I was like thinking about how to be spontaneous.
That doesn't really work, right? That doesn't.
Well, one
Anyway,
tries now and again.
yeah, okay. So what are you
It's okay.
spontaneously gonna do? I ask you questions and you just answer them, right?
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to plan anything. What were you planning? Tell us though.
I don't know. I mean, just thinking about,
What do you mean you don't know? You had all this time to plan. You don't know?
no, but like where to put the tripod, like practical things, all those things you taught me.
All right, sure. Well, you found a good place. Where are you? Are you in the living room?
I'm in my living room.
What's on the wall behind you?
Depends at what level you mean, but the one that's visible, there's a frame drum from Morocco, and there's my medieval bowed viol. I mean, it's not medieval, but my copy of the medieval bowed viol. And then
Yeah.
there's a couple of Spanish shepherd three-stringed rabels hanging up, and
Okay.
there's an oud with some broken strings next to me, and a bunch of other
Okay.
stuff.
Why does it have broken strings? What happened?
Well, because a couple of strings broke because they get old.
I think it's time to get you some new oud strings. Dimitri, where are you? Okay, so for those of you who maybe do or don't know me, this is my mom, and this is the living room I grew up in, actually. So that might explain a lot about my life um, and why I do what I do. But this is not about me. This is about you and why you do what you do. So let's go back a little bit, okay? First of all, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I'm from Montreal. I was born and I grew up in Montreal, and my parents were born and grew up in Montreal, and my grandparents were Jewish from Lithuania, Latvia, Belarus, that whole area. But they came a long time ago. They came around 1900. So it's
Wow.
been Montreal all the way.
Why are you in Toronto?
And I moved to Toronto with your father, whom I believe is here.
Robert of Light representing. Yeah. And I
I
was
think
born and
he had
raised right
gone
here.
to Montreal from Alberta, and then he wanted to move to Toronto, and I moved with him. And we haven't been together in a very long time, but of course we're friends, and you're here.
I am here. So I'm glad you moved here. And I'm a Toronto person, you're a Montreal person. That's okay. We can get along. So
As long as
growing
we
up,
don't talk about bagels or important things.
no, I'm fine. You can have your Montreal bagels. That's cool. I always bring you back Montreal bagels when I'm on tour in Montreal. I know how it
Right.
is. I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that one. But let us know in the comments if you prefer Montreal bagels or Toronto bagels. We can have a vote. Okay, so you grew up in Montreal. I mean, that doesn't, like, with this background, there's like so many things that we need to cover that I don't even know how to get there. Because did you know that you actually are on Wikipedia?
I'm on Wikipedia?
Yeah, I just Googled you.
But I always tell my students not to use Wikipedia.
It's pretty good. It's so good that I thought you almost might have written it yourself. It's pretty good, and it has so much stuff. Tamar banter. Yes, it is banter. I know. So don't worry, we'll get into some questions. We have a lot of questions, but yeah. So I Googled you this morning. I found you on Wikipedia, and it's pretty good. And it talks. I'm like, oh wow, you've done a lot. Yeah. It's pretty impressive. So growing up in Montreal, sort of what is the first thing? Well, let's fast forward a little bit, and then we'll go backwards. I just want everyone to know, like, what you do, what your specialties are, like, today. You know, what do you focus on? NYC bagels, Alina, you're cut. I don't think NYC bagels even exist. Anyways.
Not in my books.
No, that's not part of the conversation. I shouldn't have even read it. No, I'm joking. Anyway, hey, Analia. So we're just interviewing my mom here. We're asking, what is your specialty? What do you do today?
Okay, so I was sort of double role as an academically trained ethnomusicologist and medievalist. And I'm also a performer, and I go back to the old 1960s folk revival times. I was just talking with people the other day on Facebook about Pete Seeger's, the anniversary of Pete Seeger's death, and how, you know, he was one of my first big folk heroes. So it's always kind of been this double path, you know, academic research and performance and that sort of folk approach. And then I started traveling when I was 20 with my friend Edith, who now lives way out on the West Coast. And we hitchhiked around what was then Yugoslavia, so former Yugoslavia, Macedonia, Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Croatia, Kosovo, Crna Gora, Montenegro. And I got the travel bug.
Wait, pause there. Because we're already, yeah, I'm going to have to pause you. So first of all, two streams. I think you have a lot more than two streams going, but I see what you're saying, performance and academic. So now we're going back to how you got there. You went to Yugoslavia, what was then Yugoslavia in your 20s, but can you tell us why you guys originally went? Because it wasn't to chase music.
You really want the answer?
Yeah, of course.
Well, we had met these two guys. We were living on Aylmer Street in what was called the McGill Student Ghetto. And actually, Leonard Cohen had an apartment right facing us.
Are you related? Are you related to Leonard Cohen?
Well, only in as much as all Cohens go way, way back to, you know, Moses and Aaron, but not since
Everyone
then.
asks you.
That I know. And what was happening? We were out on a back balcony, I think. We had sort of two apartments that were double and shared this little back balcony. And there were these two guys washing a car in the alleyway. And we made friends with them, and one was Czech and one was Serbian, and anyway, Edith started, no, I think I'm mixing them up. I think I'm conflating two different sets of people washing cars. But anyway, at one point, Edith went out with the Serbian guy, and then they broke up, and she said, let's go to Yugoslavia and look at frescoes and look at the art and listen to the music and see if all the guys are like losers like him or he was an exception.
Conclusion?
And there was no internet or anything like that. We went to McGill, to the library, and we took out lots of books, and we took out maps, and we made a plan of where to go. And we got a really, really cheap ticket to Milan in Italy. And it turned out to be actually a charter flight, one of the first charter flights with a big plane, and it was full of nuns who were, I guess, going to Rome. And then we hitchhiked from Milan into Slovenia. This is 1970, 70. And then we spent 2 months hitchhiking through Yugoslavia. And we did eventually go to this guy's mother's house in the village. And that's actually when I found out that chicken, like when you eat chicken, it's actually from chickens, because there was this beautiful rooster in the backyard and I was admiring him. And then a couple of hours later, it was lunch.
I mean, to be fair, first of all, that's a rooster, not a chicken, but I hear your point. Where did you think chickens came from?
The supermarket wrapped up in plastic.
Where did that, anyway. City girl, still a city girl.
It was an amazing trip. I learned about carrots then too, and how you just pulled them out of the ground and they didn't grow on trees, you know, and cucumbers.
I thought you said you were an academic.
I wasn't yet.
Oh, I see. Okay. So,
well, actually, your grandmother, your granny, my mother used to say things like, you know, for an academic and someone with a PhD, there's an awful lot you don't get.
I think I take after her a lot.
Anyway,
Anyway.
we got to the village, and Edith explained who she was. And I think what's his name was Dragica. His mother looked at her and said, well, if my son didn't want you, he's not very bright. I've got other sons that, you can have who are better.
Oh wow, I didn't hear that part before when I was a kid. That's funny.
You didn't tell you that part.
Did she take her
Anyway,
up on her offer?
no, no,
Okay.
we stayed for the day and we kept
Like,
hitchhiking around.
thanks
And
for the rooster
eventually,
and the carrots. Peace. Okay.
exactly.
Fair enough. Like a
So
needed
that's
traveler.
how I got the travel bug. And then I came back to Montreal and started doing a lot of Balkan dancing and Balkan singing.
Mm.
And then I went back traveling and ended up in Spain because, well, because I was working in epidemiology, right? That, that's part of your life.
Yeah, well,
You
let's
don't,
touch on that for a second. Okay, so you're going back and forth. Travel bug got you. Meanwhile, in Montreal, you're getting your degree, I imagine, because you have like multiple degrees.
yeah,
What
I
was
was
the
getting
first
my
one?
first degree. I was getting my first bachelor's in English, honors English Lit. And I
Okay,
was
okay.
working my way through university, and by sheer chance, the McGill personnel department sent me to epidemiology. And they needed somebody who spoke French and who could help them do anything at all, be a secretary, go with them and do some interviews and write things up and correct
Mm-hmm.
everything and do it in English or French. So I ended
Mm-hmm.
up working in epidemiology, half a century before it became a household word as it is today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there was an epidemiologist who was from Bosnia. I mean, he just said Yugoslav at the time, but he was actually from Sarajevo.
Huh.
And when he found out that we were going to Yugoslavia, to then Yugoslavia, he said, oh, well, look me up in Sarajevo. I can't ask you to stay because we only have a really tiny apartment, but I know of a really cheap, clean pension that's run by family friends, and I'm sure you can stay there. So we stayed there, and I was just transferring from clarinet to alto recorder. Do I have it here? Right. I was just transferring from clarinet to alto recorder, and I was practicing Handel sonatas on the rooftop of this pension really early in the morning. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and no one was up there, well, except the girls who worked there had hung up the sheets to dry after they washed them. But it was just me and Handel in the sheets. And this guy
That
comes
sounds like a
running up
song.
the
Me and
stairs,
Handle in the Sheets. Anyway, yeah.
and this guy comes running up the stairs and says in French, how come you're on the rooftop in Sarajevo playing Handel's sonata? And he named it, like number 4, number 5, or whatever. And I said in French, well, how do you even know I speak French? And who are you? And why do you know it's a Handel sonata?
Good questions.
And he turned out to be a music teacher from Geneva, a young Jewish music teacher from Geneva. And he and his wife were traveling to Afghanistan to buy things to set up the first hippie store, exactly, the first hippie store in Geneva.
Okay.
And, we hung out, and he said, well, if you're ever back in Geneva, if you're ever in Geneva, come and visit. And the following year, when I decided to spend a year just traveling around with no goals whatsoever, I had just got my bachelor, and I thought, well, my BA, and I thought, well, I'll just travel and see what there is. Gave up 2 scholarships and a full-time job in epidemiology. And I remember, let me
Now
go
I
to Geneva
understand
and
everything.
let me go to Geneva and buy recorders, good recorders, because I was really serious about the Baroque recorder at that point. And so I phoned up Edgar and his wife, and they said, yeah, sure, come stay. And then when I was there, he said, well, if you ever go to Spain, we have this friend who studied painting here, and he went back to Spain, and you can go visit him. And if you ever go to Romania, we have these friends that we met when we were traveling through that time, going to Afghanistan to open the hippie store, and you can go visit them. And I said at the time, well, I'm not going to go to Spain because that's a cliche, like everybody goes to Spain. And then it got cold. It was like October. And I thought, well, I can buy a winter coat or I can go to Spain. So I went to Spain and I looked up the painter. I posted that painting he did of me on Facebook the other day. And it turned out that they needed someone to teach French in the village and so on and so forth.
Okay, pausing you again. Okay? I know, good thing is I know where to pause you in these. Okay, so we've now found you all the way to Spain. Hi, Shayna. Shayna also grew up folk dancing with me and her mother, Judith, every Friday forever. And we have a cool project in the works, so stay tuned. Also, Jay says, so dope. You're such a G, Dr. Cohen. I'm with that. Such a G. Somebody take a screenshot of that comment, please. I'm worried if I take a screenshot, I'll get kicked out. Everybody goes to Spain. I know. I'm with you, Analia. I know. Anyway, so, okay, pause. So somehow through rooftops, epidemiology, hippie store in Geneva with an Afghani you know, dress is there. Somehow this gets you to Spain. That's my summary. I know you'd said it much more in detail, but we're gonna pause there because you held the recorder. So every instrument you pick up, we're gonna play a game. Can you play every instrument you pick up? Can you play us something on recorder?
Um,
The
I don't know.
sonata, that sonata that you played on the rooftop. Do you remember it?
No, I don't offhand. But
All
this is
right,
the
sounds
alto,
like
which is
something else.
like the classical, well, you know, the Baroque instrument, you know, and it just sort of sounds like this. And then when I moved back from Baroque to medieval music, not long after, I found, I was going to say online, but it wasn't online. I think I saw it advertised in a print early music magazine, and I wrote, you know, a letter, like with pen and paper and stamps and so on. And I sent a letter and ordered one, and it's this one, and it's a copy of the only medieval recorder that was ever actually found, as opposed to, I mean, there's lots in paintings and sculptures and so on, but the only one that was ever actually found was found underneath a house in what is now Holland. And it was sort of, you know, eaten away a little bit because wood doesn't do very well when it's underground for several hundred years. But between what was left of it, and enough was left of it, and manuscripts, they reconstructed what it seems to have been like. So this is actually my favorite recorder, I guess. And the other cool thing about it is if you look at pictures of recorders, even in the Renaissance, sometimes they're like this with your right hand on top. And sometimes they're like this with your left hand on top, which is how we play them. And now we always teach kids they have to have their left hand on top, but it's really only because if you go on and play a clarinet or a sax or a bassoon, all the keys are set up so that your left hand has to be here and your right hand has to be here. But in the Renaissance, if you look at all these pictures of people playing recorder, it's about half and half. And the hole on the bottom that now is either just one hole on a movable joint or without a movable joint, or maybe it has a key on it, was just stopped up. There's two holes, and the one you were using was stopped up with beeswax.
Wow. I think you
So
told
if
me that
you
when I
held
was
it
like
this way,
3,
you'd
but I didn't
use the
remember.
beeswax thing. Hmm?
I said, I think you might have told me that when I was around 3, but I forgot. So that one I've heard. Okay, we have a question from Anna Leah. Why are they called recorders?
Apparently, it's an old English word that means to warble like a bird.
How would you say it in Old English?
No, record, I guess. But
Record. Oh.
it's the only language I mean, that was great, Analia, because it really is the only language where they're not called something like sweet flute or flute with a peak, flute with edge, or flute with a block flute in German, because there's a little wooden piece that goes inside and shapes the mouthpiece.
There you go. That's an answer. Now that's an answer.
English is different, as they say. No, it's Spain is different, but you know, the same idea.
Okay, now we're in Spain, so thank you for that. So
That was a
also
seamless transition, right?
that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
See, that's the academic side. We do seamless.
I
We
know you've
push
been working on
forward.
it a few decades, so you better be good by now.
Yeah, I should tell
Dominican,
you guys
yeah.
that it's very
Wow.
funny to be interviewed by Tamar, because not only is she my daughter, but she's my daughter that came on all these field trips with me from the time she was tiny, like literally a baby. And one of the first things she learned back when I was still using a reel-to-reel tape recorder was that as long as you can see the tape going around and around, you have to be quiet unless it's an emergency. And then maybe we'd get, you know, a popsicle or an ice cream or go to a park or something. And then by the time you were, what, 8, I think you were taking the still photos, and then you commandeered the video camera pretty early because you said you did it better than me and your hands were steadier, which is true, I think.
I mean, the truth is the truth.
So all of those fieldwork interviews that you did with me, including the one when you were about 14 and you said, I'm not doing this anymore, and you wouldn't pick up the video camera. So now here you are asking me the questions and calling
You just had to point that out. You just had to. I understand. I see the irony. You guys have to understand that when I graduated high school and I said I wanted to go into business, my mom cried and was like, don't be one of those people. No. I'm like, what people? Like people that make money. You know, normally it's the opposite. You know, people are like, I'm going to be an artist. And then their parents cry. So anyway, so that gives you a lot. Hey, Jaffa Road. Hey, Aaron. I'm assuming that's Aaron Lightstone. Okay, so going back, you've landed in Spain. You've arrived in Spain because it was cold. You didn't want to buy a winter coat in Northern Europe. Okay, for those of you who missed the beginning, you'll have to go and see how we got here. Okay, so you're in Spain in a little village in the southeast, if I remember correctly, and you're teaching English, French, teaching French.
French.
Okay,
French. Yeah. Okay.
and
And it
then
was
what?
under Franco. So it was the last few years of the Franco dictatorship, and the village that I was living in spoke the Valencian variety of Catalan. Well, they just say Valencian, but Valencian Catalan, which under Franco was forbidden in public, along with Basque and Galician. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't even know these languages existed. I barely knew anything about Spanish, but I had years and years of Latin. And as soon as I started learning Spanish just from listening, and I bought a cheap grammar book, I realized that Spanish was kind of like Latin, but on holiday. So
Yeah, because everyone learned Spanish because they learned Latin first. Sure. Okay.
everyone in my generation who
Didn't
went
you
to,
once try and leave your Latin class and like walk into a closet or something?
pardon me?
Didn't you once try and leave your Latin class and walk into a
No,
closet?
that wasn't Latin. That was philosophy.
Oh, is that a philosophical thing to do?
No.
Anyway,
It was
okay, we
because-
digress. Come back for that one. Okay, teaching French in Spain under Franco. And how was that? What was that like? In the 70s
Well, it was really
under
interesting because I
Franco.
didn't know anything about anything. Like I was really politically naive. And again, there was no internet. I knew Quebec politics, and that was about it. So I knew all about separatism in Quebec, and I spoke French, and I could sort of handle both sides and all this kind of thing. But I didn't know anything about Spanish politics or fascism or anything at all. And the idea of not being allowed to speak a language in public was completely foreign to me. And I learned a couple of songs, from people, and there were people who would sit behind closed doors and sing songs of the Spanish Civil War, which were illegal. You couldn't sing them. And one of them had gone up to France and in Perpignan and bought a couple of vinyls of Spanish Civil War songs, and we learned them all from that. There was Cuando cante el gallo negro es que ya se acaba el día. Cuando canta el gallo negro es que ya se acaba el día. Si canta el gallo rojo, otro gallo cantaría. Ay, si es que yo miento, que el cantar que yo canto lo lleve el viento. Ay, qué desencanto. Si se lleva el viento lo que yo canto. So we learned all those, and we sang them with the doors closed and the curtains drawn, even when it was warm outside, and really quietly. And I mean, can you imagine singing quietly in Spain all together? We sang really quietly. We learned a couple of Mallorcan songs. That's when there was a guy from Mallorca who was teaching in the school, and that's when I learned the chimbomba. The chimbomba or zambomba in Spanish, chimbomba in Catalan. That's when I first learned the chimbomba song, Bomba ya no sona, ni sona, ni sonara. And the transformation song that you've maybe, I think you had it as a kid's book, Little Bunny, who said, if I turn into this, will you come and get me? And the mother said, if you turn into a cloud, I'll turn into the wind. It's an old song called Sus Transformaciones, but I learned it originally as a Mallorcan song. Si tú das la rosa. Anyway,
you have a chimbomba at hand?
They're all broken, actually. I have to get one that works, but it's a friction drum with skin on top and a bamboo pole, and you rub the pole and it makes this grunting sound.
I've been having to deal with this demonstration my whole life. Okay, it's all right now, but when you're like 11 at a school and you're demonstrating instruments, no fun. Let's just say. But it's funny now. We'll post a picture of that afterwards. Okay. So you're teaching French. You're in Spain. You're teaching there under Franco.
I went up to it was Semana Santa. It was Easter week, so there were 2 weeks off at the time, and I went up to meet friends from Montreal. In fact, the epidemiologist's son, who was studying in France, and Margot was going to visit her son, Margot, whom we lost a couple of years ago and whom you grew up knowing. So I went up to join.
Hi, Morris, if you're watching.
So I went up to join Jamie and his friends and Margot in the south of France. And then when I came back, everybody had been arrested in the village.
Why?
Everybody who spoke Valencian had been arrested for speaking Valencian Catalan in the classroom. And a few people weren't. The people I stayed with were still there, I guess, because they were more right-wing. I hadn't thought about that at the time, but that was the story. And much later, over 20 years later, I did a concert in the village. And the guy who picked me up at the station, at the train station, looked at me and said, "Did you come to my classroom like 20 years ago and sing French Canadian songs and play recorder?" And I said, "I did." And I said, "You were in that class. What happened when all those teachers were fired or they lost their certificado de buena conducta? They lost their certificates of good behavior and they couldn't get a job without it." Yeah, under Franco. And he said, it was just like in that film, La Lengua de la Mariposa, where there was an infiltrator from Franco's government, from the Falange, among the teachers. And he denounced all of them for speaking Valencian Catalan over Easter week. And that's what happened. And he forced all the students to write letters to the government denouncing their favorite teachers. And if they didn't, they threatened that they would hurt their families.
Oh, God.
Yes. So.
Did you ever find those teachers later?
A couple of them, yeah.
Of course you did. Why do I even ask? Okay, so
when you remember when we went fishing, when we stayed with those guys and the teenagers,
yeah, I remember.
Was that one of that was one of the families.
Got it. Yeah, got it. Okay, so why did you ever leave?
Well, I wanted to like see Morocco, and that was in between. I saw Morocco in between and came back to the village. But then they said, "Well, you should leave because you've got long hair and you're a hippie and you're from America," and they figure you must be selling drugs.
Logical conclusion. Got it.
And I said, "But I don't even know how to smoke a cigarette. Like I never learned, let alone any other drugs." And they said, "Well, we know that because we keep offering you cigarettes and you don't smoke. It's really boring. It's kind of silly, but they don't know that. So you should probably leave." So I'd seen a boat that was leaving Barcelona for Istanbul. And if you got a student card, and I wasn't a student anymore because I graduated, but you could get fake student cards. So I got one that said McGill University, Valencia. And you could get a ticket for about the equivalent of maybe $20 at the time, which, was nothing. But it was in a dormitory, and you didn't get to go and eat in the dining room or anything. You had to get off the boat every time it stopped at every port of call and buy food and come back on. And it was going to Turkey. So I took the boat to Turkey.
And so far I'm with you. See, it all seems very logical to me.
So then I took the boat, to Turkey, and I met these two guys, and we went around for 2 months. And then they were going on to Afghanistan and India and so on. And I should have gone with them, but I thought incorrectly that I could go do that some other time. Because I wasn't sure how I'd get back. I was okay going.
You might have got stuck there forever. You never know.
But I even still have an old passport. I have the visa to Iran.
Wow.
Because you have to go through Iran to get there, and I still have it.
Wait, but you skipped a story that I really like. Can you tell the story, like the thing on the boat where the real hippies, whatever, that thing?
Oh, you mean when all the first class passengers got sick?
Yeah.
And it was horrible in dormitories. They were really terrible. They smelled and everybody was sick and it was just impossible. So I went up to the deck, and the two guys that's where I met these two guys, Graham and Patrick, I think were their names. And practically nobody else was on deck because all the first class passengers were sick, and the cook would come up to us and he would say, "Do you want to eat? I have lots of food." And he'd bring us to the dining room, and he would just regale us with all this food that was going to go bad because, all these people weren't eating it. Nice. And in the bar, I don't drink, as you know, but anything, Coca-Cola, coffee, whatever we wanted, they would just keep giving it to us, and they taught us how to count in Turkish, and they taught us, quite a bit of vocabulary. And then the last day, when the weather was really, really nice, all the first class people started coming out on deck again. We were sitting, someone had a guitar, and we were sitting and singing and playing guitar, and this woman and her husband came up to us, and I really wish I had asked her to send me the photo. She said, "Look, Harry, look, real hippies. Quick, take a picture."
And nothing has changed. No, I'm joking. I know, I want to see that picture too. Somebody should draw it. If there's any good artists on here, I challenge somebody to draw a picture of my mom with her two hippie guy friends playing guitar on the deck, with all the ritzy people taking photos of them.
Of the Turkish boat, the Karadeniz, the Black Sea.
On the Black Sea, yeah. And okay, so where were we? Yeah, so now you've got to Turkey. You're in Turkey for a bit. Then how'd you get home?
Well, Graham and Pat went on to, Afghanistan, and I went back up to the Turkish-Bulgarian border. I was taking buses because I didn't really want to hitch alone in Turkey. I hitched alone in Spain a lot, and France, and the rest of Europe, but I didn't really want to hitchhike alone in Turkey because back in the day, I learned really, really fast not even to wear short skirts. But as long as I sort of dressed okay and I was, modest and reasonable, I could get along just about everywhere. So I took the bus back to, I guess, to Istanbul, and then I took the same bus in 2008 when I was back in Turkey for a conference, and I thought, well, I bet the bus is much better now. I'm going to check it out. So I took that same night bus from Istanbul to Sofia, Bulgaria, and actually it was about exactly the same. It hadn't changed much at all, and it didn't have a washing.
Probably the exact same actual bus, just saying. Guys, I grew up on buses with my mom. I know all about it.
I never learned how to drive.
Yeah, I got my driver's license when I was 16.
Because because my youngest sister said that you shouldn't grow up to be, ignorant like me, and that you should learn how to drive.
Not ignorant, just taking overnight buses when it's like 2 hours away, and it takes you 2 days to get to a town. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so
anyway,
so yeah, okay. Eventually,
after a while, I realized that the bus schedules in Bulgaria and Romania were so complicated; it was impossible to find anything out. And I never had a seat anyway, and I was always like sort of standing, holding on to the top of this bus. So I started hitchhiking again. So I hitchhiked through the Balkans for a couple of months, and then I got back to Switzerland eventually, as I remember, and I went to see the same guy, Edgar and Claire, the people that I knew from getting the recorders in Geneva. And then I remember this, there was a cheap flight. It was like $20 or something before Ryanair. It was like a real flight, Swiss Air, going to England. So I thought, okay, I'll just go up to England and I'll check England out. And the McGregor's niece, Fenella, or Muffy, was living there. She was working as a nurse in London, and I could stay with her. So I remember we took off, like I got on the plane, and it had actually taxied. And it was at that point, that planes get to when they've done the taxiing, they stop for a minute and then they take off. And it stopped and it didn't go again. And the pilot said in French, everybody, I'd like to ask your opinion. 2 young people were having coffee and they didn't notice that it was time to go to the gate to get their plane, and they've missed it. Should we go back and get them, or should we just leave them? Let's have a vote.
Oh my God.
And he said, you have to understand that if we go back, it might be a long time before we get another spot at the gate. And everyone voted 100% unanimously to go back and get them. And they got on. It was like this clueless looking, couple my age. And they got on. They just sort of went, hi, everyone. Like they didn't apologize or anything.
Those are the days.
It was 72 by then. So then I went to England, and I went to Scotland, and I went to the Hebrides Islands. And then it turned out my friend Gail was getting married in New York City, and she said, do you want to come? Please come. So I thought, okay, I've been gone a year. I guess it's time to go back. And I found a cheap one-way ticket back and went to New York and went to Gail's wedding and took the night bus back up to Montreal.
Whoa. You just had to throw New York in there. Sure, first, not to get New York bagels. Let's be clear about that. Had to make it home to Montreal for that. Okay. So after all these crazy adventures, which, by the way, have never once stopped since, I was going to say since I knew you, but since my whole life. Anyway, so never once stopped since that first trip. Okay, so, and hi, everyone who's joined. Hi, Kunal from India. Hey, Leah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. And this is my mom. For those of you who don't know, I'm interviewing her today as part of Curtain Call, Fab Collab's weekly interview series. And you can check out the whole interview afterwards on our IGTV if you missed the beginning and how crazily we got here. Okay, so on Wikipedia today, I actually read the titles of like all your masters and degrees. So now that I'm like, that's what you did. So
but you were at all those conferences with me.
I know, but I don't know. I was busy making friendship bracelets on demand for money. I had a side hustle, So, so how, from all these travels, can you actually tell us the title of do you remember the title of your master's? I'm sure you do.
Le rôle de la femme musicienne dans la communauté juive, chrétienne et musulmane en Espagne médiévale. The role of
everybody got that?
The role of women musicians in the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish community, among women in the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities of medieval Spain.
Okay, why?
Well, because I had this medieval group with, Susan and Ariane and all the it was always the three of us, Susan and Ariane and myself, and originally a woman called Christine. And then we had a guy in the group for a while. I can't even remember his name. He played lute. And then he left. He just left Montreal. He was traveling. And we got, who came first? Was it Michelle? I don't remember. That's when we put up that sign that said, tired of playing second Rebek, come and join us. Mm-hmm. And then someone said, oh, it's so nice. You're a medieval women's ensemble. And we'd never thought of that. I mean, we had this guy in the group. He just happened to leave. So we sort of looked at each other and we went, oh, yeah, right. We're a women's medieval ensemble. Uh-huh. And then people kept asking if women perform music in the Middle Ages. And I kept saying, well, why wouldn't they? And then finally I thought, okay, I guess I'll write a thesis about it. So I did.
But you've been trending since before the trends existed.
It was long before the trend existed, actually. And people didn't even say three cultures then. They actually still said three religions. Mm-hmm. So I did it was really interesting because the work that I did then, again, it was pre-internet. I actually had to go to libraries and pull out books and do interlibrary loan. And I went down and spent a few weeks with Gail in New York City, the one who had got married that time after my trip, and went to the Barnard Library, the Columbia Library, New York City Public Library, and got all kinds of fantastic things. And I wrote my thesis, and your aunt, Franny, came with me for the defense. So the Institut d'études médiévales, at the time, the Institute of Medieval Studies at the Université de Montréal, doesn't exist anymore. But at the time, it was still run by all priests. And most of them were active priests, but some of them were I don't know what you call them, like lapsed priests or ex-priests. They were all scholars,
Right.
And my advisor, my advisor was a German woman who was totally brilliant. She had 2 or 3 doctorates, one in French, one in German, and, she was a very, very modern, interesting person with relationships all over the place. But anyway, everybody else on the jury were, priests, and I had to do the defense. And one of the things about my thesis was the difference between women musicians in public and women musicians in private in each of the 3 religions.
Oh, cool.
And the fact that women in public were perceived as little better than prostitutes. So if you were a Christian woman and you played the harp, and you sang, your father, the Duke, might say, oh, I have these important guests coming for dinner, dear. Would you take out your harp and sing a couple of, old songs for them? And you would do that, and that would be fine. It'd be really cool. But if you took that harp and you went out to a public square, that was just not on. So I was talking about that in the first half. And Franny, your aunt, was sitting in the graduate student lounge preparing things and waiting for me. And she had just come back from a year studying as an exchange student in Israel. And she brought back all these embroidered things and little kerchiefs and stuff like that. And at the break, I went back to meet her there, and she had prepared mint tea. And we dressed up with all these kerchiefs and everything. And I had my oud. And having just told the priests all about what it meant if a woman performed in public.
Oh, you're such trouble.
I appeared after the intermission, well, not intermission, the break, I guess, with Franny, with your aunt, all dressed up, both of us with the little kerchiefs and everything. And she was carrying the tray with the mint tea, and she offered it to everybody. And I took out the oud and said, and about those women in public. And my thesis advisor, Elisabeth, she was sitting there like this. And she said to me, why didn't you tell me you were going to do this? Why didn't you warn me? And I said, because you would have said no.
I haven't actually heard this story, but it makes a lot of sense. I wish you had a video of that. But you passed, yeah. So you're good. I mean, you've demonstrated what you were talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was just a demonstration.
All right. So what led, I know the answer, but those watching don't know the answer. So what led from medieval studies to your next big specialty, right? Unless I'm skipping something in between, but I believe that your next big specialty was Sephardic music. So how did you get from one to the other?
Well, partly because I got tired of saying I didn't know what singing really sounded like in the Middle Ages. Because
hold on, which was your PhD, right? So your PhD, what was the title?
My PhD is in ethnomusicology, and it's the role of music in the Judeo-Spanish, in the Sephardic communities of Montreal and Toronto, survival, function with no comma and change.
Okay, very specific there. Thank you. So how did you get from medieval masters to Sephardic PhD?
Well, I wasn't even going to do a PhD. I did what I wanted to do. I showed that there were women musicians performing in the Middle Ages in Spain, and that was really what I wanted to show, and I was happy. But then I picked up when I was doing my master's, I picked up a book at the McGill Library
Mm-hmm.
on the new bookshelf, on the just arrived shelf. I just picked it up, idly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about a Sephardic Jewish printer of songs and ballads and stories in 1920s Salonika, Thessaloniki,
Wow.
in what was then a huge Sephardic community. It was 97% decimated in the Holocaust. 97% of them were sent to the camps and died. But at the time, they were actually like a really, really strong community. And Ladino was even spoken in the ports as a kind of lingua franca. And I
Wow.
picked this up, and it was so brilliantly written that I read the whole thing through, like almost as if it were a novel and not an 400-page academic study. And then I wrote a fan letter to the author.
Wait, wasn't the author from 1920?
No, the author of the book about the guy from 1920.
Thank you, thank you.
And you know him. He was the one that you told to speak more slowly when he was speaking in public because no one could understand him.
Sam Armistead?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I wrote him a fan letter at the University of Pennsylvania Press, and and he wrote right back, and he said, well, because I had told him I was working on my thesis, right, and what it was about, and he wrote back, and not only did he write back, he wrote back with a 3-page manual typewritten bibliography with comments under each book, and said, well, you should read this for this reason. And I'm assuming you read French and Spanish and Latin. He wrote, and you should read this book, and you should read this book. And if you want me to be on your committee, I can do that.
Oh, now I know where you got it from. That's how you answer emails. Now I get it. Anyone wants to know anything, send my mom an email, and that's the response you'll get. Be prepared.
So, and then he said, and if you are in New York, next time you're in New York, I'm just in Philadelphia, it's close by. He said, then after that, he actually moved. He was teaching in California the rest of his life, but then he was still in Philly. And so I did the next time I was in New York, and he came to be at the train station.
Right on brand, Mom, right on brand.
And he took me to the faculty club for lunch, and then he took me to his office, and he had stacks and stacks of books and reel-to-reel tapes and cassette tapes and articles and papers. And he sat there and he put on one tape after another of his fieldwork. And when I say tape, I mean reel-to-reel tape. Of all these old women singing Sephardic ballads, and he would close his eyes. He had a patch over one eye that apparently was from a chemistry experiment in high school.
Oh man.
He was, he sort of had an absent-minded professor's look with glasses and everything, but a patch over one eye. And he sat back and he sang by memory all the words to all the ballads. And then he kept giving me books and photocopies and off-prints and so on. And then he drove me back to the train. He said, well, so when you start your PhD, and I don't know, when you finish your master's, and I'll be on your committee, and when you start your PhD, you should do it in ethnomusicology on Sephardic music because it really needs you. And I said, I'm not doing any of that. And he said, oh, and you should call my brilliant former PhD student, Oro Anahori Librovich in Montreal.
Got it. I forgot about that link.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so he's that one piece of fan mail really sent you on the rest of your life's journey, basically. And I don't like that word journey, but it is true.
Well, it's not a journey if you plan it that way. It just sort of happens,
Journeys can be planned or unplanned. Please tell us the name of this wonderful man.
Samuel G. Armistead, Armistead. He passed away in 2013.
Yeah, wonderful man. I met him many times when I was a child. Leah, we'll get to your question in a second, unless we want to cover it right now. Is there a concert that you've seen that stands out as the most powerful, just off the top of your head?
Nope. Seen lots of wonderful concerts.
Obviously, it's mine.
Oh, even besides you, everything you do is wonderful and stands out. That's
Thanks, Mom. Okay, well, if something occurs to you along the way, do tell us. We also have a couple of questions that I want to cover. But, okay, so off to Sephardic. What is Sephardic music for those of you who don't know? Or for those of you who do know?
So Sepharad is the traditional name for the past 2,000 years or so for what are today's Spain and Portugal. So Sephardic means descended from the Jews of Spain and Portugal, and particularly from the Jews who were exiled in 1492 by the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, and 5 years later from Portugal, and 1 year after that from the Kingdom of Navarra in 1498. And went either to the north of Africa, many of them actually went before to the north of Africa, and eventually settled in what is now Morocco. They also settled in other parts, but they coalesced in what is now Morocco. And then many others sailed all the way across the Mediterranean, Some stopped in Italy and didn't leave and stayed there, but many went right to Constantinople because the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, which was pretty new then, it was about just a few decades old, you know, it was about 40 years old, and he's supposed to have written this letter, which has never been found and never been documented, but it's such a great story.
Probably under that building with that medieval recorder.
He was supposed to have written a letter to the King of Spain saying, look, loser, you want to lose your Jews and send them to me? It's cool with me. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're astronomers, they're philosophers, they're writers. In fact, the first printing press in Turkey was set up by one of those Sephardic Jews from Spain. So the short part of the long story is they kept their language alive all this time. They kept speaking what eventually coalesced in this diaspora from aspects of, say, 15th century Castilian with bits of Catalan and Portuguese, and then Hebrew added, and then wherever they lived, they would add Turkish, or they would add words from Greek or words from Slavic languages or Arabic in Morocco, or, you know, eventually Italian and French. And it became known as various things: Spanish, Judeo, Judesmo, Judeo-Spanish, Ladino, which is what people usually call it now.
Okay, so in sum, Sephardic Jews, in one sentence, Sephardic Jews are Jews that were expelled from Spain in 1492, then known as Sepharad, and went kind of all around the Mediterranean.
Yeah, they're descended from them. They're not the same ones 500 years later. You know.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
you for clarifying. Got it. So, Annalena says, so modest.
Because they kept speaking the language, and they kept some of the song text, some of the words to some of the songs going, especially the old narrative ballads. They think the songs are that old, but actually most of the songs that people know as popular Sephardic songs are from the mid to late 19th century on. Right. And even when they're old words, we don't know when the tunes are from. They're from much later.
Got it. Which, you know, I think you know what's coming now, because there was a question.
Oh, no. Daniel, you're not there, are you?
Well, I mean, we had to get there sometime. So I posted a couple of days ago, like on Facebook, and I was like, you know, whoever has a question for my mom, please comment below. And there was a few really good ones. And shucks, what was that? I have to pull it up, guys. I did have it up. What?
I remember by heart, by memory, but I'm not going to tell you if you don't remember.
Oh, no. I got it. Can you do that face you do when someone talks about how Ocho Candelicas was a song their grandmother used to sing? You have so many faces, you can't even choose. You're like, Okay, Ocho Candelica. Sorry, let's say, I just want to read the comments. Belly dancing with Jackie. What a beautiful explanation. Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And Karin Canto Sefarad. Nice live. My grandma was from Izmir. I sing Sephardic songs since my childhood. Well, we're definitely gonna have to get in touch with you, because my mom, if she doesn't know you already, will want to know you.
Who said
that? Karen, Karin, Cantos de Sefarad.
Okay, wow.
Get in touch with us, Karen, because, you know, like I said, if my mom doesn't know you already, she wants to know you. I can tell you that much. So why do you? So basically, I'm asking that question about the face with Ocho Candelicas. Thanks, Daniel Jonas, because clearly that's a modern song that people attribute. Now I'm giving the answer away. Why do you make that face?
Well, the song itself is just a song. It's a song by Flore Jagoda, who is a wonderful everything: singer, disseminator, teacher, embodiment of Sephardic songs. She was from Bosnia-Herzegovina. And most people have heard her name who are interested at all in Sephardic music. She passed away not very long ago, just a few months ago, in her 90s. And I don't know if Aviva is here, but, you know, she and I were part of the online singing memorial for her. But one of the songs that she wrote was this 8 Little Candles, Ocho Candelicas, as a Hanukkah song to a tango rhythm. And people paid it the compliment of thinking it was a traditional song. It became so popular that it really started circulating by oral transmission, like any folk song, any traditional song. And actually, for anyone who composes a song, it's a great compliment when that happens. And Flore never worried much about copyright and royalty issues. She and her husband, they were doing fine, and she really, it wasn't, obviously she preferred to be acknowledged, but it wasn't huge. And people loved the songs so much, they assumed it was traditional. And of course, when the internet came out and it was a lot easier to learn things and acquire knowledge about things, many more people realized that she had written it. But because it really became part of oral tradition in the late 20th century, people assumed it was very old. And then people started saying, well, I don't know if they said my grandmother sang that Daniel, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but they would say things about it, like the medieval Sephardic song, Otro Candelicas. And that's, I
So
think,
is
what
there
my
such thing as a
friend and
medieval
colleague,
Sephardic song? Oh, sorry, I cut you off. What
not,
were you saying?
I mean, there were, obviously, people sang lots of songs. They didn't write them down. And, you know, the thing about the Middle Ages is that people don't realize how labor intensive writing something down was.
Mm,
You had to have parchment. You had to prepare the parchment. You had to prepare your writing implement. You had to prepare the ink.
mm,
Like it was all very, very labor intensive. Plus you had to know how to do it, which
mm,
wasn't, they say, c'était pas évident, you know, wasn't obvious. And then that was just words to write down music. And the system of musical notation was changing all the time. The system that we know was, you know, was developed fairly late.
mm,
And first it was, you know, without staff lines at all. And then it was with staff lines, but only one, and then two, and then three. And then it was this clef and that clef. And then the rhythm wasn't fixed in the notation and so on. And it changed all the time. So you really had to have a scribe who not only knew how to write the language that, or the languages, say French and Latin, for example, that he was working in, usually he, sometimes she, but they had to know as well what the current musical notation was and how to write it, which was a whole other story. And it changed, you know, every 20, 25 years. So folk songs didn't get written down.
mm,
What got written down was the music, first of all, of the church,
mm,
and then the music of noble, you know, noble classes, high up classes who had the money and the leisure to commission this kind of thing and to ask for them.
mm,
So by the time people thought about writing down folk songs, I mean, that was much later, and they wrote down first anyway, even in Europe, the words without the music. So
right.
yes, of course, Sephardic people sang songs, but we don't know what they were.
Mm, right. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. What about, now you know we're getting here. What about, so you studied a lot of the music of the Jews who were expelled from Spain, but were there any that stayed? And what was their music like?
Well, you mean what? You mean the question I asked in 1994?
Yeah, that very one.
So yeah, what happened to the Jews who stayed on as hidden Jews, as crypto Jews? Is that what you're asking me about?
Obviously. Yeah.
Who lived on the outside as Christians, as practicing Christians, but on the inside as Jews. And so, as Tamar reminds me, I got my first project grant, I think in 95 or 96. But we went first in 94. Remember, we took the bus from Salamanca to Guarda.
Vaguely.
And we visited Anna and Raphael, and that's
Oh, yeah, I
when
remember.
yeah, and she wasn't going to sing. She wasn't going to let me record. And then Raphael, her husband, said, looking at you were 8 years old, and he said, oh, but that sweet little girl, she's going to be so disappointed. I think you should let her mother record.
Yeah, I'm going to be disappointed. Yeah, I know. Using me my whole life. I get it. I get it.
I
Oh, I
wasn't
have a cute
using
little
it. It
girl.
wasn't my
Let me
idea.
in. Huh?
He just said it wasn't my idea. Yeah, so long and short of it is no. They don't seem to have retained any old melodies. They did for a while. There's Inquisition reports early on, you know, in the 16th century that say things like, oh, so-and-so who used to be Jewish was found to congregate with his friends and sing those old Hebrew songs. But we don't know what they were. They didn't write them down or anything.
I mean, to quote you. Oh, go ahead.
And then reports like that just drop off. They just start disappearing. And presumably it was just too dangerous to sing tunes that were different from the tunes that everybody else sang. So they developed a lot of prayers that were recited. And by the time you and I met them, when, you know, in Mercedes' kitchen, you would hear the women doing the prayers, but in this very, very quiet, very fast way. So if you were just on the other side of the door, if you heard anything at all, it was women chatting while they made the midday meal.
Right. Yeah, so for those of you who may have missed that, we're talking about the crypto Jews or the hidden Jews in primarily Portugal that remained after the Inquisition in the late 1400s. And we spent a lot of time with them when I was, you know, growing up. And that's one of my mom's biggest specialties is their culture and music, and we really stayed with them. Hey, so Jackie's asking, is there any evidence of dances that were specific to Sephardic Jews? Good question.
Oh, that's such a good question. Not as far as well, yeah, yes and no. There's a really simple sort of social dance that's documented in Bulgaria and Bosnia where the in-laws would sort of go back and forth, almost like a kind of square dance sort of thing. Like now the mother-in-law comes out and the father-in-law goes back. But I don't know how old it is. It may not be terribly old.
Right.
but most of the documentation is they did it. They
Uh-huh.
danced, but we don't know what. Um, in Morocco and also in Greece and Turkey, they just dance the way, sort of what I think of sometimes as kosher belly dance. It's kind of movements that you see in what we call, belly dancing or danse orientale, but fully clothed, of course. I mean, very modest, very modestly dressed, and the movements are more subtle. Like
Mhm.
but they're the same kind of movements, And in Greece and Turkey, in the old Ottoman Empire, they would have two different styles. One was called a la franga and a la turca. So a la turca was in general this whole, sort of what I call kosher belly dance style. And a la franga or franca was using, sort of France as the idea of European. So when they started learning, modern social dances of the early 20th century, cha-cha and Charleston and so on, they would call that, and waltz, the modern waltz, they would call that a la franga.
Mm. So can I be so, bold as to presume that what you were saying is that much like the music of the Sephardic Jews, their dances took on a lot of, like culture of where they were living, right? Because I've heard you say
Yeah.
that so many times. So they didn't really necessarily have specific dances, but they would dance sort of, as those around them, which is pretty natural when you move somewhere
So
and
they
you
would
live
they would
somewhere for 100 years.
adapt it to their own, to their own
Adapt it.
use, except for this, this sort of in-laws dance
Hmm.
that was documented in Bulgaria
Interesting.
and
Never heard of
Bosnia.
that one. That's cool because Jackie's a belly dancer, so that's interesting for her for sure. And I was gonna say a little bit. The music was a bit more specific. I must clarify that. They took a lot of, as my understanding is, they took a lot of rhythms, melodies, and stories from where they were living, but it was still much more. And even to this day, first of all, it's in a primarily different language, and much more like, how can I say, like specifically from the Sephardic Jews. You know what I mean? I'm
Right.
not
And like
like.
anybody who borrows, music or traditions, you take the parts that appeal to you most or that work the best with the, for the use you're going to make of it, whether it's religious or secular or social, and, you adapt it that way.
Mm-hmm. Can you sing as an example? What are you gonna sing?
Um,
Or maybe something short from Turkey and something short from Morocco or something like that?
I don't know. Well, the songs that you know, right? Like, kızım seni Ali'ye vereyim, kızım seni Ali'ye vereyim, y te vou dar a un alto.
No quiero.
Hmm? Exactly.
I'm just answering.
And what changed there is really interesting because in the Turkish song, it's the father who says to the daughter that he's going to marry her off, and he names very specific names, to Ali, to Mohammed, and she says, "No, I don't want him for this reason. I don't want him for that reason." But in the Sephardic Jewish version, it's the mother, not the father. And to avoid all those names, instead of putting in Jewish names like, Avram or Moshe or something, she just says the tall one, the short one, the one with skin problems, and so on.
And what's the yes to? You can't miss the best part.
The one who likes to drink and party in both.
Such a bad influence on me as a child, I'm just saying. Okay, so okay, so I know it's been almost an hour, so I know you're like you might have to teach something or do something. Oh, I played that song with you over 20 years ago. Says Aaron Lightstone. Yeah, I bet you did.
Who said that, Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron.
You did indeed, Aaron.
From Jaffa Road, by the way, go follow Jaffa Road. We have I'm singing on their new album. We have new music coming out next Friday. Just had to make that plug. Hi, Elisa. Thanks for joining. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we're with my mom for those of you just joining. And, I know I called her beforehand, as I do everybody that I interview, and I was like, anything specific you want to talk about? Yeah, my life and work. Okay, pretty standard. Anything specific you don't want to talk about? She's like, yeah, I don't want to answer all those questions that people ask me.
I didn't say that.
I know, but don't
I
kill the
didn't say
story.
that at all. I just said I didn't want to answer the really complicated philosophical ones because it's too hard.
Yeah, well, we're
Because
going to start with those because, I'm
because
your daughter. So,
they need real conversations. Like,
well, I know, but that's okay. You can continue the real conversations offline. But since I'm your daughter, I'm obviously not going to listen to you. So here's from Justin. As the world grows closer together, what responsibility do artists have to help humanity move forward?
I'll talk to you some other time, Justin.
Justin,
It's such a Justin question.
Yeah, so okay, that's like a whole other conversation. We'll have to bring Justin in for that one. Okay, if anybody has any thoughts, share it down below. Not before. Oh my goodness, share it down below. Uh, okay, this is a sweet one. This is a sweet one. From Lena, she's a flamenco dancer in Saskatoon. What are your sources of inspiration?
I
I
don't
mean, I
know,
think
but
we just went through all of them.
I think I went through all of them. They're mostly all the people and the traveling, that I've done. And then I also don't sing. As an ethnomusicologist, I don't work much on preferences. I study what's there and I try and understand how it got there and why and what the people of that culture were thinking and what their circumstances were and so on. So I try not to do, aesthetic value judgments as an ethnomusicologist. But as a singer and a performer, I don't ever sing a song or learn a song that I don't like. I have to love a song before I'm going to sing it.
I'm with
But
you.
it could be from anywhere. It could be, very occasionally even from a book and not a live person singing. But usually it's from a person,
Yeah,
and
it does sound like it's like all the people along your way have really inspired you. What's this? Oh my God. One of many word books.
it's my songbook, my current
Can you
songbook.
put that closer? Because even I have laser eye surgery and I can't even read it.
It's, it's volume 4 or 5 of my traveling songbook, but this one I've had about 20 years, I guess. And way back in the day, I could actually read it all without glasses, but now I have to put my glasses on to read it.
Oh my
So
God. And then I would be on stage and my mom would be like, oh, just sing this song that you used to sing 15 years ago. I'm like, I don't remember it. She's like, oh, here, find it in my word book. I'm like, thanks. Anyways, okay, so Zumbul 99, not sure who that is, but thank you so much. This is so interesting. And finally, we can hear objective view of the history of Sephardic music for sure. My dad, Tamar, Lana, and Judith Cohen, best Fab Club interview ever. Yes, so interesting. Okay, there's a couple more questions that people ask. I'm not going to let you get away. Bear with us, guys, okay? Because, we want to hear these answers. So hold on a second. Well, we have one. What drew you to ethnomusicology? I mean, how does that contribute to your worldview as it is today? We kind of answered these along the way.
yeah,
What drew you to ethnomusicology? I guess it affects, can I answer for you? I guess it affects your view on absolute. Because you always, at least for me, you always like, when we go to a show and even if you don't like the music, you're always like, yeah, but from an ethnomusicology viewpoint, it's interesting
yeah.
because X, Y, Z, So it's given you
People
that like,
sometimes misunderstand the word ethnomusicology. It's the ethno doesn't mean ethnic. It means ethnos, meaning people. So it's not like it's ethnic music or anything like that. It can be any music. It can be disco music. It can be historically, Western art music. It can be Bach. But the whole point is it's connected with people. So there's historical ethnomusicology. There's applied ethnomusicology. So the whole thing is not to consider the musicological aspects without the people. So that's why, sometimes with you, I say, okay, but from an ethnomusicological aspect, meaning that it's made, I think the discipline over all these years has made me a lot more, I'm not a very objective person, but it's, given me more objectivity and it's got me to, catch myself up when I, get too subjective and too judgmental.
Okay, to be fair, as your critical daughter here, okay, to be fair, you're very good at separating subjective and objective. You are very good at that. You can say, I hate it because of this reason, but, objectively, la, 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 la. You're very good at that. I
don't
gotta give
think
you
I
that.
ever say, oh, la, 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 la.
Okay, you know what I mean. So Susan Frank wants to know what archived library are these songbooks going to end up in? Well, part of your collection is already in a library, right? Which?
Well, most of my field collection is at the National Sound Archive of Israel at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And it's there in kind of raw form, but they don't have most of my videos yet. They have what I sent them, what I brought them in 1990, I think, which was the bulk of the most important audio stuff I had, because most of those women I recorded by then, have passed away since then. And they were maybe the last generation who sang the really old songs. But they also have everything I've recorded on audio since then, but I have to get all the videos ready. And I'll probably leave it all there because they digitize everything, they catalog it, they make sure that it's accessible. In terms of things like this songbook, I don't know, I guess you get it.
Yeah, call me later. Anyone wants to help me archive my mom's craziness with where else to put it, walls and walls of tapes and books and musical instruments, just give me a shout. Jay, I know you're watching, that's you. Anyone else? Okay, we have a couple more questions here. This is so cool that people ask all these questions. I should do this every week. I mean, Irina just says, why is she so awesome and endlessly cool? I'm not going to answer that one.
It's just your perception, Irina. you know.
Hussein Jan Mohammed, building on Justin, how do artists play a role in humanity? It's the same question, I guess.
Same question. You can join in that discussion with
and
Justin.
To what music education can do and be in our global settings. That's a
I don't
good
know. Global's pretty big.
I got an answer. Just go to my mom's classes and find out. She teaches ethnomusicology and Renaissance stuff, whatever, at York. In some. Anyways, or you can just write her. Like I said, you'll get a book. Yeah, Jay says yes, yeah. Ali and Tamar, we're going to get on that. Nice. We have a plan. I don't know, Mom, but we might announce it right here, right now. We have a plan to do a podcast with you based on your stories and archives. Okay, top secret. Okay, so Stacy, what's it so like to travel all over the world and give lectures all over the world? Clearly awesome.
I saw that. I wish I traveled all over the world. It always, gets me when people say that because it reminds me immediately of all the places I've never been to. Like, I've never been to India. I've never, the only part of the whole continent of Africa I know is Morocco, which is this like one tiny corner of Africa. I've never been to Australia. I've never been to like lots of places, to Indonesia.
Tour again. So, I mean, but you did perform at the Alliance Française in China recently.
Pretty good. That was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, it was 2018. Yeah, that was one of the craziest trips. That was the year that Gabby, your cousin, got married in Israel, and we went to Israel, and then I went to Spain, and then I went to Morocco, and then I went to Portugal, and then I went back to Spain for 2 days, and then I flew to China and, took an overnight flight passing through Russia, changing planes in Russia. And I remember as soon as I got there, they'd actually paid my flight from Spain and paid for my hotel from the conference in Beijing. And so I dumped all my stuff, and then I ran to see Tiananmen Square on the bus. I figured out how the buses work in Beijing before the conference started. And then I gave my paper, and then I did a concert at the Alliance Française in Beijing, because the guy who ran the Alliance in Toronto was moved to the Alliance in Beijing. And it turned out to be at a folk club, the Dusk Dawn Club, and I kept getting mixed up and calling it the Dawn Dusk Club, because I get up early. So it was fun. And then I took the overnight flight back through Russia to Poland and got off the plane and did a concert at the Ethnographic Museum in Warsaw. And then I went to Krakow, and then I went back to Spain. It was fun. That summer was really cool.
Okay, Stacey, there's your answer. That's what it's like. It's insanity. So,
it's so much fun. No, but it's so much fun. It's like,
but see what I'm saying? From 1972 to 2018, nothing has changed.
Like, you get off a plane and you're somewhere you've never been before, and it's so exciting. And then on top of it all, you get to give a talk or sing or something in a place that you would never have gone to if you hadn't been invited to give a talk or something there. And it's like so cool. And then you meet all these people that you never would have met. And
Thanks, Karen. Nice idea, the podcast. I agree. Yeah, stay tuned for that. Okay, nothing has changed, like I said, from 1972 to 2018. Same. It sounds like exactly the same.
I have a cell phone. I have devices.
One cell phone? You have like 20 cell phones. Okay. Anyway, hold on. There's two more questions. Okay. So the first one was, I think this is from Ali. So this was, what are your, greatest moments of achievements and biggest regrets?
It's right in front of me on the screen that you're all looking at.
That was pretty sappy, but I'll take it.
But it's true.
I'm your biggest regret?
No, you're my biggest accomplishment.
I'm joking. Biggest regret? Even I don't know this.
Not having a camera with me on that very first trip.
What an ethnomusicologist's response. Oh my goodness, we'll take it. Alina, that might be a good quote. My biggest regret. Okay, and then... No,
I was really I'll tell you why. I could have brought a camera with me. I was just being super pretentious, and I said, in sort of like late 1960s hippie pretentious and everything, and I said, well, I'll just remember everything. It'll be graven in my memory. I don't need, external pieces of mechanism to record it all.
I mean,
and there I was in like Turkey and Morocco and saw some of the things probably for the last time that that they were happening in Spain and Turkey and Morocco and the Balkans. And
I mean, there is some beauty to that. For those of you who are just joining, we're nearing the end, sadly. I mean, maybe it's a first part of the series or something, but we're nearing the end of an interview with my mom, Dr. Judith R Cohen, here on Fab Collab Live. We do a weekly interview series called Curtain Call. And I do have to ask you Amanda's question, of course. Amanda Martinez, who was on here a few weeks ago, she asked, I believe, how did you balance? This is where I come in. How did you balance motherhood and this crazy performing, touring academic life of yours? That's a good question. How'd you do it?
Aren't I the wrong person to ask? Shouldn't it be you?
I
Well,
didn't
I do
balance it.
remember
I was
writing
very imbalanced.
I
Don't
do
feed me
remember
no
writing my
Barbies.
dissertation and
What?
to a deadline, and you were in a cradle. You were in a baby. You were a baby, and you were in a cradle, and you wouldn't go to sleep by yourself in your crib and everything. You had to be like in the same room as somebody. It could be me. It could be your father. It could be anybody that felt familiar, but you didn't want to be alone. So I'd be rocking your cradle with my foot and writing my dissertation at my first computer. So I mean, that's the beginning of the. Oh yeah, because I never learned to type with 10 fingers
That
because
doesn't
my
really
father.
answer the question.
Well, my father died when I was very, very young, as you know, and one of the few things he left was a typewriter, a manual typewriter. So I sat on the floor with that typewriter for ages, and I learned how to type when I learned how to read and write, when I was in
Huh?
grade one, grade two. And then it wasn't until high school that someone saw me typing something and said, "You're supposed to use 10 fingers." And I went, "Why? I can do everything with 2. Like, why would I need 10?" And then I worked in epidemiology as a secretary and did all those things. And I typed in French. And it was the old typewriters where you had red ink on the bottom of the ribbon. And if you pressed a certain thing, you could get red and so on. And then when I realized that you really were supposed to type with 10 fingers, I started typing, spreading my fingers out. So it looked as if I were using all 10. And every now and again, I'd like use my thumb for
Oh
something.
my God. I mean, you kind of use
Um,
a third finger, but yeah, I've seen you. Okay, that doesn't
every now and
answer the
again.
question about how you balance life, being a
Well,
mother
that's
and,
how. I
and
mean, I
traveling.
just did everything. I just did everything at the same time. And I don't need to sleep a lot. I took you to the park a lot. I spent hours and hours with you in the park, and did all those things and all the birthday parties. Remember when you and Susie Wild used to have birthday parties, joint birthday parties together on my house or their house, and I took you with me basically everywhere. You had some babysitters for sure. I mean, Nika and so on, but mostly I took you with me. And I don't know.
I had no choice. Let's be clear. I had no choice. I went on all these crazy trips and, still sometimes go. And I was on stage. She basically brought me on stage. She's like, babysitter, just sing. That's my experience.
I remember when you first realized that you could sign autographs. We were doing that series of castle concerts, and those you didn't mind so much because they were concerts in real castles. Like they had set out an auditorium, like an outdoor uh, seat space in these real medieval castles, like the remnants of real medieval castles. And I think it was one where you were wearing that white shirt with the blue embroidery that I had the same one of. I think it was from Chinatown or something, and a blue skirt. And someone came up to us and ignored me completely and showed you the program and said, "Can you autograph this for me?" And your whole face changed. I think your attitude changed toward performing right at that moment, in fact.
I bet. Yeah, that makes sense.
But you did the medieval concerts with the medieval women's group with Susan and Ariane, and when Rebecca was performing with us too. We have pictures of that. And then Gironeldo, the Sephardic, the Moroccan Sephardic ensemble, the medieval ensemble, my Balkan ensemble, Nova Tradiția, and just me, and of course, as Aaron Lightstone correctly said, with Aaron and other people that were playing.
Wafir, Bill. Yeah,
So
the
yeah,
musicians of the
Wafir
videos.
Adila. And so you became fluent in all these languages. I remember saying, "Oh, I don't have anything to do," and I'd say, "Go play with those kids in a village," and you'd say, "But I don't speak their language," and I'd say, "Well, so go play with them," and you'd learn it.
There
And you
you
did.
go. Go
I
play with
brought
those
it.
kids in a village. That's how she did it. All right. Well, guys, everyone, thank you so much for being here, for tuning in. Anything else that we've missed? There's one last story that I want to ask you that I really like that had stayed in. I know it goes back to the beginning of your traveling days and your hitchhiking days. And, just can you paint us the picture of you and Edith in that long row of hitchhikers, the only successful ones in your mini skirts?
Oh, they were really mini skirts. Oh, that. You remember that? So Edith
Yeah.
and I thought that we should differentiate ourselves from all the hitchhikers. They were all wearing like dirty jeans and things with holes in them and ratty backpacks. And Edith said, it was Edith's idea. She was older. I mean, she still is older than I am.
Edith is
Obviously,
the
if you
one she
like.
went to Sarajevo with back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's the mother of Ursula, who's my goddaughter, and who ended up being friends by sheer chance with your Aunt Joanne in
Okay.
Victoria.
Okay.
But of course, that was before that. So she said, "No, let's wear dresses." They weren't mini dresses. They actually went to our knees or just below. But she said, "Let's wear dresses and carry suitcases." And then everybody, and we also got veils and cheap rings at Woolworths so that she said, so we could say we were widows.
That's horrible. Huh?
Well, it worked pretty well. Like we'd be in a long line of people. I remember in the interior, there was nobody. Like we were the only ones hitchhiking usually. But on the coast, like around Dubrovnik, where you were with me in 2008 at that conference,
Yeah.
were you horseback riding along that same coast?
Yes, I remember.
Tons and tons and tons. It were, lineups and lineups of hitchhikers with their thumbs out. And the cars would go right past all of them and come directly to us and stop.
Why didn't you do that when I was growing up? How come we didn't dress like nice to hitchhike when I was a kid?
We didn't hitchhike when you were a kid. It's a trick question. We didn't do that. I took buses.
That's
remember?
A lie. Oh my goodness.
We did not hitchhike. That one Galician milk truck driver was when we went to the gas station outside Hervas and there was no bus, and I asked the gas station attendant if he knew anyone who could take us to Cáceres. But the last time I hitchhiked was in 2012, so not quite 10 years ago, and I guess I was 62 or something. Yeah, and I realized that I was doing the Alan Lomax thing that we forgot to talk about, where I was following, Alan, I'm the editor of the Alan Lomax Spain recordings, and I was following up some of the village people that he'd interviewed. And I had to go from this one little village way up in the hills, this stunningly beautiful village in Aragon, to a somewhat larger town. And I realized that I'd missed the buses. There weren't very many buses anyway, and I had to get back to the main city, to Zaragoza, that night. So I hitchhiked. And the guy who picked me up is about my age, maybe a little bit younger than me. And, nice, sort of just a nice family father type, and he's driving and he said, okay, where's your car? Do you just need gas? Do we just need to pick up some gas and put it in your car? Do we need to call to get it towed? And I said, who told you I had a car? What car? And he said, ha ha, very funny. Where's your car? I said, I don't have a car. Don't you understand what hitchhiking means? So I said, no, stop. No sabe lo que quiere decir. And he said, you're so, and I said, old? He said, what are you doing? And I said, well, if you really want to know, it's because you know how they keep the head, or maybe it's the body, I think it's the head, I can't remember which is which, of Saint Orosia, the one who was martyred in the Middle Ages, in the church where I'm just coming from in Yebra, and they keep her body in a box in the church where you're taking me in Jaca, and then once a year they get together and the stick dancers come out and they sing a hymn and they bring her body and her head together. And I wanted to ask the priest if I could, see that box, because I saw the box, with the other part of her in this village, and I wanted to hear the hymn of Saint Orosia, because Alan Lomax recorded it in 1952. And he looked at me and he said, where are you from? And I said, Canada. And he said, is this what people talk about in Canada?
You're giving a strange image of the country, Mom. When they just get in, I'll take you.
No, we were already driving, and
turns
he
out you're
pulled
the
over
most
on the side.
of them all.
Oh, you pulled over on the side because you're not allowed to use the cell phone when you're driving in Spain. And he called his wife, and he said, "Dear, I'm gonna be a bit late for lunch. If you want to eat, go ahead. No, I'll explain after. It's too complicated. No, I'm fine. Don't worry. Nothing. No problem. I'll tell you after." And then he takes off like really fast. There was no traffic on the road at all. It was just a little road between villages, and he takes off really fast, and he screeches up to this cathedral. And the priest was a classic. He was sort of tall and quite heavy, and he was wearing this big brown robe, and he was just locking the cathedral gate with a golden key and putting it in his pocket. And he says, the priest is just going home to lunch. We better catch him right now, because he won't come back till at least 5 o'clock, and you'll miss your bus. And he screeches up, to the priest and says, Father, please don't go home for lunch yet. In Spanish, obviously, there's this woman from Canada, and the head of Saint Orosia and the body of Saint Orosia. And
classic.
Well, so classic. Come on in.
I wouldn't believe you if I hadn't been on many of those trips myself. So I'd be like, you're making this up. But I know it to be true.
I would love to be able to make up this kind of story. It's like I have no imagination at all. I just sort of like relive things.
First of all, that's not true. And second of all, you don't need it when you actually live the things. Okay, last thing I'm going to ask. So would you, grace us and would you play us a little bit? I think what we haven't heard today is VL. Maybe, or you can do whatever you want, obviously, but that's what I'm requesting. You want to sing and play a little bit of VL before we go? This is medieval VL.
I actually had it out, and the reason I had it out is because I'm playing Friday night, and also Sunday night for the Toronto Storytellers Festival.
What
And
time?
so this Friday night, I'm only doing 10 minutes on Friday, and I'm doing 15 minutes on Sunday. But
Awesome. We'll post
Friday,
the link.
I'm doing a song story that I put together with the Ballad of the Duke of Gandia. You know that one, Masariva y Masariva. And
Yes, I
then
do.
Sunday, I've been asked to do a bunch of medieval spring songs because, it's spring and all that. I'm just
Of
taking off
course.
my glasses
Everyone
so
gets
I
asked
don't.
to do medieval spring songs in spring.
Hmm?
I bet everyone gets asked that. I mean, they've probably been asked that since the Middle Ages.
So anyway, this is the Viel. This is it's a sort of copy of I guess, a pretty late medieval Viel, and some of them had frets and some didn't. This one does, but you can take them off. They're just tied on with nylon. It's got a bow. As you can see, you can't really see the bow because of, Instagram screen logistics.
That's all right.
Or novel entre la florette, ne passez ni bête ni blanchette, trouvailles sous une baudrette, voyons violette, dame qui ressemble sa compagnette. À qui est-ce de m'avouer, de sa vie de l'avouer, auquel il est ami, au pauvre qui est construit, mais aussi la j'ai pu que lui, et bien sans lui la mieux, ou au riche qui a ses avoués malhonneux, mais en lui la liberté, c'est de courtoisie. So it's kind of tempting. I had to put some rosin on the bow. But.
Thanks, Mom. And for those of you who want to follow more, learn more, she does have, quite a few albums out there. JudithCohen.ca. That's your website, right? Just checking. Okay. JudithCohen.ca. Go check it out. Jay says absolutely
And on
priceless.
some of
Thank you
those,
both.
most of those albums, Tamar actually sings with me, but she's much younger. The last one was 2005, right?
Yeah. When I was like 8, 14, and 19. And I just want to say hi to Nora and Em also, who are on here. And they're also playing on Fab Club's event on Friday, Girls with Gear on Bramble. So check them out. And go to my mom's storytelling thing first and then head over to Bramble. We'll post the link. And anything else? Susan Frank says, what a treat. I agree. So anything
Susan
else?
Frank, are you there? That's so nice. Wow.
Yeah.
She was Susan was one of the people I was telling you about in the talk on Jewish music the other day. Remember, I told you I was at this talk with a bunch of, ethnomusicology and nerdy types,
I
kind
mean,
of
you
like
can't tell
me.
me that like every day, but yeah, I remember. Okay, guys. So, and Mom, I know this is like not even like, a tiny percent of like all the stories and the things that she's done and accomplished and the lives that she's lived. So, feel free to reach out, get in touch with me or with my mom if you want to know more. And check out her music, judithcohen.ca. Check out the Wikipedia article. It's pretty good. And if you don't remember the titles of all her papers, they're there. Go read. She's published in like millions of places. So, we can post some links to where she's published. And Mom, anything else you want to say?
I was at a Zoom interview last night with the famous feminist Letty Pogrebin, who founded Ms. Magazine with Gloria Steinem, and she was being interviewed by her daughter, by Avi Pogrebin. And at the very end of this really fascinating and actually, very intellectual history of feminism and so forth, Avi said to her mother, Mom, is there anything else you want to say? And she's 81. She's totally brilliant, 81 and so on, founder of Ms. And what did she say? She said, I just want to tell you I love you. So I think I'll end with that one too. I just want to tell you I love you.
Oh, I love you too, Mom. Thanks. And happy Mother's Day coming up this Sunday. I guess we'll have to
Well,
hang out and do something. Yeah.
I think I'm busy, but we'll do
Oh
the
my
next thing.
God. Whatever. Okay. Guys, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week is with Leah and Cassandra, flamenco dancer in Vancouver. It's going to be awesome. So check it out. You can check out the
Oh,
full
you told me
interview.
that. I look forward to that. I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. I look forward to it. See you then. See you on Friday on Bramble. Check out all of our previous interviews at Fab Collab Live on our IGTV, and go to fabclub.ca for everything else. And
Oh,
yeah.
and I know I forgot to show this before. And make sure that you have the best mask ever.
Nice, Mom. Nice, nice product placement. Good job. Nice. Love it. See, I turned into a sort of businesswoman after all. All right, Mom. Love you. I'll call you right after this. Bye, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.